on the whole big hat thing. A hat is something that you use to it is not only to cover, but it's also to like express, right? She goes hoping with all these big intentions of a big hat, but a big hat also hides your real feelings. So I think there's a real big play on intentions and also this intimacy. And intimacy is what I also picked up on in terms of just the overall narration and point of view of this entire story. There was a real, I was just really interested in the point of view of the narrator and how intimate it was.
Adding on to your point of view of the narrative, the sentence where it says it becomes clear at once that help was needed because the husband was not pleased. And then like the very last paragraph, you looked at him and you saw this and you thought, oh, now don't be like that. And so like this narrative was really like paying attention, like because everything you guys have said is like dead on, and the narrator can see all of this and probably has never seen this couple before. And so it's like how many other people have like overlooked all these small little details that the narrator is able to like pick up on immediately. Yeah.
You sure? Sorry. So that's what I was thinking about too. And when you pointed out the adjectives in the very beginning, that's like just the device that I kept noticing. And I think when I first read it, I noticed it from the perspective of like characterization, like, oh, this is like a really unhealthy marriage and this is like very sad. And then the second time I read it looking for like adjectives, I was thinking more about like, okay, this is kind of a limited point of view also, and it's a very dramatized point of view of what's happening. So like in every sentence, there's an adjective or an adverb that's giving you this, presumably a woman's perspective on this marriage that she's like judging. And I think it's interesting because I think it's what happens a lot, like in public, where like you're observing something and you just like assume into it like so many things, even if you don't know them at all. And I think it's funny too that it's called Birthday Party, because I think this also happens like just in social interactions a lot, where like you might be observing something that really is real and really is destructive and really is like terrible, but also your point of view is my point of view is so limited. And so I think it's interesting just how dramatized the language is that makes me think more about like, why is this the narrator's point of view on this couple?
I think also the part that really stood out to me now is the reactions of the narrator. So like the line that Kenya just pulled out about how clear at once that help was needed because the husband was not pleased. She acknowledges that help is needed. And then in the last paragraph, she says, I couldn't bear to look at the woman then, so I stared at my plate and waited for quite a long time, not long enough. Because when she turns around, she's still crying. It's like, it's so much easier for me to just avoid the situation and look away. Even though that it's evident to me that help is needed. And I think it speaks volumes to like what we do so much on a consistent basis, as far as like sometimes from that perspective of like, you know, like, am I really seeing, you know, and is this what I'm really seeing? And I don't want to be too judgmental, you know, and sometimes we just stay in this role of being a bystander and not wanting to assume because it's easier to not assume, and, you know, like all of these things that go into why the narrator's reaction was.
I think to kind of respond to both of those comments quickly before something else. The narrator introduces in the first or second sentence, the first paragraph, banquet opposite us. And that's, for the first two paragraphs, the only reference to the fact that the narrator is a first person and in the story. But also the idea of they're on the banquet opposite us sets up kind of a mirror image there. And then in the third paragraph, we move into, you looked at him, you saw this, you thought, I saw, I stared. There's so much personal response or reaction, as you were saying. And to me, that suggested that the narrator is doing a lot of projection in the first two paragraphs, and it's coming back around in that third paragraph. And I think the inference you can make is that there's just as much wrong with the narrator's marriage as with the one opposite them. But real quick, I also wanted to point out the last sentence, crying quietly and heartbrokenly and helpless. We have crying quietly and heartbrokenly, quietly and heartbrokenly are referring to crying, but then the helpless doesn't have the adjectival or the adverbial ending, so that's her.
Yeah.
She's the helpless one. It's not the crying. And again, I think that speaks to the element of projection, which is like, it's almost like everyone who reads this also makes their own level of projection. Like you were saying a lot about what this man was beyond what was actually here. And it's kind of a scene designed to, in that sort of like voyeuristic way, force us to get into our own projections, which are ultimately based on our own circumstances. Not trying to suggest anything, but like I think like we have experiences, and like obviously this person, this narrator has experiences that cause us to read into other people's lives more than is necessarily there.
But it seemed like the entire restaurant was